What's up everyone, Andrew Bain here, and on today's video, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at a MESHUGGAH song all the way back in 1994. I would have been 2 years old when this song originally came out, but that's besides the point. What we're going to do is we're taking a look at Humiliative and re-recording it from scratch in modern times. For this video, I used a variety of different plugins from Neural DSP, so if you like the tones on the guitars or the bass that you're about to hear, be sure to stick around because at the end of this video, I'm going to be explaining all of them and showing them off. Also want to give a big thank you to my friend Eric Moretin for providing the guitar solo for this song. But that's enough chit chat. This is Humiliative if it was recorded in 2022. Let's go. Okay, so now that the cover is done, we're going to go and talk about the different guitar and bass tones that were being used throughout this cover. Again, all of the tones that you just heard were done using neural DSP plugins of various sorts, and we're going to talk about all of them, so stay tuned for that. First and foremost, obviously, the first thing I'm sure all of you want to know is what was the rhythm guitar tone, since that makes up the bulk of the song. So since this is a MESHUGGAH cover, obviously I used the Fortin Nameless Suite, which you can see on the screen right now. So the Fortin Nameless Suite is, of course, based off of MESHUGGAH's signature amp from Fortin. It's just called the Nameless Suite because reasons. So starting off for the main rhythm tone, we're going to start in the pedal section. In this pedal section, I was using the Zool, which is a noise gate set to pretty much 50%, and I was also using the grind pedal, which is basically a boost set very high, almost at full, not quite, maybe like 85% or so, which is right there. And then if we move over to the amp section, you can see I have my gain fairly low, just a tiny bit over half. Presence is a lot lower at around 2. Bass is about 7, mid is about middle at 5, treble is also about at the midpoint, and then gain 1 and 2 are both around 8. And that's what I was using for the main rhythm tone. I know people are going to ask in advance about impulse responses. Sometimes I use impulse responses. Honestly, the ones that come with neural DSP are completely fine. And up until recently, I just use the stock impulse responses all the time anyways. So for the sake of this video and myself wanting efficiency and ease of use, I just left them as the default impulse responses. So within each neural DSP plugin, you can choose a variety of different internal mics, as you can see there. Or of course, load your own impulse responses if you want to. In this case, I was using a blend of the Dynamic 57 and the Condenser 184 microphone. And one last thing to explain before I move on to showing you how it sounds by itself is I was only running one instance of this plugin in stereo mode. So as you can see, of course, I double track the rhythm guitars, but I'm actually only running one instance of the plugin and just running it in stereo, which means it's receiving both signals at the same time. You don't have to do it this way. You can definitely load 2 instances of the plugin if you want. But for my sake, I usually find this is a little bit easier. And that way, if I alter any of the tone settings, I don't have to go into both instances of the plugin and like remember what I'm doing and copy paste it or whatever. It's just a little easier. So with that being said, this is what the rhythm guitar tone sounds like by itself. We're going to skip ahead to this part of the song. So as you can hear, pretty basic, genty, if you will, rhythm tone. There is almost no bass in the tone because obviously the bass guitar is filling in a lot of that. The only other thing I was doing for the rhythm tone was I was also adding a pre and post EQ. So the first EQ is basically on the direct input of the guitar. So this is before it even hits the amp sim. So as you can see, I pretty much have a high pass around 180 hertz, and then I also have a cut around, what is this, around 3 kilohertz or so. So that's happening to the DI track before it even hits the Nameless Suite. And then after the Nameless Suite, I'm hitting it with a little bit more EQ once again. This is a little bit more involved, but pretty much once again, low passing, getting rid of all those low frequencies, an additional low cut at 100 hertz. This allows the kick drum especially to poke through, cut around 250 hertz for the snare and bass guitar, boosting a little bit at 500 hertz, which is your mids, and then cutting again at 2 kilohertz and 4 kilohertz. And that's pretty much all that's going on. Basic high pass over here. Next up, we're going to talk about the bass tone, since again, the bass is obviously happening throughout the entire song. Most of the time, I like to track my own bass using these lovely dingwalls back here, but for this song, I was feeling like it actually kind of sounded a little bit better with programmed bass, just because MESHUGGAH has that like very mechanical sound. I know that they don't program bass and they do fully record, but I don't know, I was kind of feeling recording. And also, it made my life easier because I didn't need to relearn everything on bass again, which is a little harder to play because the frets are farther apart and all that. So I did a blend of the two. For one part, I recorded bass, but for the rest, it's all programmed. But I was using the Neural DSP plugins for tones either way. So we'll start out with the programmed bass. For the programmed bass, I was using 2 plugins for tone, which is the Parallax from Neural DSP Before we even get to the parallax though, the bass is primarily coming from this plugin, which is the Umansky bass plugin. I have it set to the DI mode because again, we're using the parallax for tone. The Umansky bass does include its own tone settings, but again, I just went for DI for the sake of, you know, having it be a little bit more consistent with the other bass tones I usually use. And obviously, since this video is sponsored by Neural DSP, it made more sense to use their plugins for this as well. And the parallax is just an awesome sounding plugin. So if we bypass the parallax plugin, you'll hear that this is just a standard DI bass. So nothing too crazy going on there. And then with the parallax turned on, that transforms the bass tone entirely to sound like this. So we're going to move on and talk about the parallax plugin a little bit here. The thing that makes this plugin so awesome is basically it allows you to distort and, you know, play with the settings of the low, the mid, and the high end of your bass guitar. It's usually pretty common practice to split your bass signal between the low and the high. That's what people have been doing pretty much forever for metal mixes especially. But with this plugin, you can kind of do that within the same plugin, so it just makes it a little bit easier. And it's pretty cool because you have control over the compression and the drive of different aspects of your bass tone. So with that being said, what I have going on here is I have the low over here at around 200 hertz, compression at 0.9, mid distortions at about 50%, high distortion, again, just left it at mid. And then we also have this equalizer section where, of course, you could do way more than what I did, but all I did in this case was I just pulled the 500 hertz region of the bass completely down. As I mentioned in the guitar section of the rhythm tone, my guitars tend to be very heavy in the 500 hertz range. So therefore, on the bass end, I don't want there to be almost any bass in that range because I want the guitars to really shine through in that area. So once again, we'll play the bass by itself so you can hear how this all sounds. So as you can see, there's a huge absence of bass in this region, again, because I pulled it out completely. If we bring that back and play it again, it'll sound quite different. So again, very simple EQ that just gets rid of the bass in the area I don't want it. And then what I'm going to do is, again, play this tone and cycle through the different low, mid, and high sections so you can hear what each section does respectively. So we'll start out with just the low section. So as you can hear, basically when all three are combined, you're getting that nice high end that sits above the guitar, the mid that kind of sits below / in parallel to the guitar, and then the low compression, which is of course all the low end of your bass guitar. One more time, I know there is an equalizer within Neural DSP's plugin right here, but I also run a little bit of extra EQ after the fact using just the Infinity EQ from Slate Digital, which is the same EQ I use on my guitar. Very, very basic, but in this case, same thing, just a low pass, kind of getting rid of the 80 hertz-ish range, which helps to, you know, make the kick and the bass guitar sit in the same-ish range without interfering with each other too much, hopefully. And then once again, getting rid of a lot of the 250 hertz range because that's where I like my snare to sit. Pretty basic. Okay, next up we have one more bass guitar tone to talk about. This is the actual played bass part, because in this song there's a part where the bass is playing by itself, and I thought it sounded weird having it be programmed, because it's pretty obvious that it's programmed, so I chose to just record this one single part. And also, since the bass is by itself, I wanted to give it a little bit different of a tone so it stood out even more than the rest of the bass throughout the rest of the song. So in this instance, it's very, very simple. All I was using was a single plugin, which is the Dark Glass Ultra plugin from Neural DSP, of course. And this basically is just a way more distorted bass tone. And I actually didn't really do anything to this to make it sound great. All I did was choose Erman's preset, which is Dist to B7U. And I thought it sounded great off the bat, and I really just didn't feel the need to change it any more than that. So if we play that soloed bass part, it will sound like this. So just a very angry, pissed off bass. If you turn the Dark Glass plugin off, you can hear that you'll just have the DI, obviously. So pretty much instant pissed bass tone, love it. Okay, we just have 2 more guitar tones to talk about. Next is the lead guitar tone, and again, in this case, you guys might make fun of me, but if I ever find a preset that I like, I have no problem just going with that preset. And maybe some of you will appreciate that as well, because I know sometimes you don't want to be messing around with your tone settings all day. You just want one that sounds good off the bat. And in this case, I found the preset that was called Set Phaser to Stun, and honestly, I really liked how it sounded immediately, and I didn't really feel the need to change anything on it. I just added a little bit of extra EQ after the fact, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, this is the Neural DSP Archetype Petrucci plugin, which is one of their newest plugins. And this is, yeah, straight up just one of John Petrucci's presets. And I thought it sounded great and didn't really feel the need to change it at all. And again, huge shout out to my friend Eric for doing this solo. It's absolutely nuts. There's no way I could have come even close to doing anything like this. So yeah, the reason I chose to use the Petrucci plugin for this section of the song is because Frederick from MESHUGGAH often uses a lot of like very weird effects on his guitar solos or lead tones that basically just make his guitar sound very alien. So when I found this preset, I honestly thought that basically did the trick immediately. This obviously is not what Frederick would actually do, but for the sake of getting a MESHUGGAH-ish lead, I thought this was great. So again, this is a preset that already exists within the plugin. If you go download it yourself, you can get this tone instantly because it's already there. Moving over to the pedal section, we got overdrive, phaser, and chorus all on. Then for the amp, we are using the highest gain amp that is included in this plugin. And then on the cabinet section, again, just using the stock impulse responses. Similar to the Fortin Nameless Suite, you know, you can just choose whichever microphones you want. Again, I just left it at default because I liked how it sounded. There's an EQ section, which I wasn't using at all because I still personally prefer to use my own EQ just because I'm a little bit more used to it. And last but not least, in the final section of the plugin, we are using a chorus, a delay, and reverb. So a ton of effects in this tone. It sounds absolutely wild. Okay, so final guitar tone is the clean tone that happens near the end of the song. So for the clean tone, what I was using was the Archetype Plini plugin. This one came out a little while ago, but I still personally think it's one of my favorites for clean tones in general. Again, of course, from Neural DSP. So for this one, it is a preset I made when I was making some Viljarda covers a while back. So I used the same preset as I used for that one. Pretty much what I'm doing is in the first pedal section, I have the compression at full and the gain slightly up, not using the overdrive pedal at all. Then if we move over to the amp section, I'm using the mid gain amp with a tiny bit of gain, bright switch engaged, less bass, less mids, more treble, because again, we don't want it to interfere with the rhythm guitar or the bass guitar. I've been saying that this whole video, you probably know that by now. Presence is also at full to help it to stand out over top of everything else that's going on, because this part is a little dense in the mix. EQ section, I guess for some reason for this one, I did choose to use the built-in EQ. Basically, again, get rid of pretty much all the low end, get rid of a bunch of the 250 hertz because I want the snare to be there, get rid of 500 hertz because I want the rhythm guitars to be there, get rid of 4K because it's a little bit chirpy and annoying sounding. That's pretty much all that's going on there. Again, stock impulse responses, just the Dynamic 57 and Ribbon 160 mic. Again, as with all the plugins, you can choose whichever mics you want. I thought these ones sounded the best for my purposes. And then last but not least, we have the delay and reverb section. I'm using both. And as you can see here, the delay is like 40% blended, whereas the reverb is 50% blended. So it's a very wet, clean tone, I guess you could say. And that sounds like this. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video. If you're interested in getting any of these plugins, go check out the link in the description or the pinned comment below. You can also get a free trial of all of these plugins, so don't worry about buying it before trying it to know if it's right for you. Feel free to try any of them, copy my settings, do whatever you want. Neural DSP makes awesome plugins, and I use these all the time for so many of the videos that you've heard and seen on my channel. This company is great, always a pleasure working with them, and a big thank you again to them for sponsoring this video. Speaking of thanks, one more big thank you to my friend Eric Moretin. Go check out his YouTube channel. He is an absolute shredder. He's really, really good. And of course, a big thank you to all my Patreon members whose names are on the screen at this point in time. If you're interested in guitar tabs, audio downloads, or stems, you can find all of that over on my Patreon page, which is also linked in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you soon.